For almost 8 years, football thought it had Ousmane Dembele figured out. Seriously, ask almost any football fan to describe him, and you'll probably hear the same things. Ridiculously talented, ridiculously fast, can use both feet, made of glass. That last one sounds harsh, but it's basically become part of his identity. And that's exactly why I think everyone has completely missed what's happening. Because this isn't the Barcelona version of Ousmane Dembele anymore. Actually, I don't even think that player exists anymore. Now, you might think I'm saying all of this because of the Norway game. 3 goals. First World Cup hat-trick. Only the 3rd French men's player to ever do it after Just Fontaine and Kylian Mbappé. Fair enough. But here's the weird part. I don't think Norway is the story. I think Norway is just the moment everyone else finally noticed the story. Let me explain. When people watched Dembele score 3 goals, the reaction was almost identical everywhere. He's finally fulfilling his potential. He's finally become consistent. It took him long enough, but I don't think finally is the right word, because if you've watched PSG over the last 2 seasons, you've already seen this player. The World Cup didn't create him. It introduced him to people who hadn't been paying attention. So here's the real question. If this version of Dembele has existed for a while, why does almost nobody talk about him like this? I think the answer has nothing to do with PSG. It starts with Barcelona. Actually, it starts even earlier than that. Go back to Rennes in 2015. Dembele wasn't just another exciting teenager. He was one of those players that made defenders look uncomfortable before he'd even touched the ball. Not because he was the quickest, not because he was the strongest, because nobody could predict him. Every defender is taught the same thing. Show the winger onto his weaker foot. Simple. Except Dembele didn't really have one. Force him left? Fine. He'll beat you. Force him right? Fine. He'll beat you that way too. That kind of unpredictability is unbelievably difficult to defend because it removes your first decision. And at the highest level, hesitation usually ends badly. 1 full senior season at Rennes was enough. 12 league goals. France's Young Player of the Year. Suddenly, every major club in Europe was watching him. Borussia Dortmund won the race. And honestly, that first season in Germany almost looked too easy. 49 appearances, 10 goals, a DFB Pokal winner's medal. He even scored in the final. But the statistics aren't what people remember. Think back to those Dortmund highlights. How many goals do you actually remember? Probably not many. What you remember is the feeling. Every time Dembele got the ball, something ridiculous felt possible. 1 second he'd be standing still. The next he'd glide between 2 defenders as if they weren't there. Sometimes it looked like he made decisions after everyone else had already committed. That's a rare gift. And Barcelona saw exactly the same thing. Neymar had just left for Paris. They weren't looking for someone to replace Neymar completely. Nobody could. They were looking for someone capable of creating the same feeling every time he received the ball. Uncertainty. So they paid over 100 million euros to sign a 20-year-old who looked like he could become one of football's defining attackers. Looking back now, people love saying Barcelona made a mistake. I don't really agree. At the time, almost everyone thought it was the right signing. The talent wasn't the question. The question was whether his body would allow that talent to develop. Unfortunately, football answered that question pretty quickly. This is where I think almost everyone gets Dembele's story wrong. People say Barcelona ruined him. I don't think that's true. People say injuries ruined him. I don't think that's completely true either. The injuries were obvious. Hamstrings, muscle problems, long rehabilitation periods. In the 2019 and 2020 season alone, he missed almost 300 days and 39 matches. Those numbers are brutal, but here's what nobody really talks about. Imagine you're 20 years old. You've just become one of the most expensive players in football history. Every time you start finding rhythm, your season stops. Every time you begin building confidence, you disappear for another 2 months. How do you actually develop as a player like that? You don't. You survive. And that's exactly what Dembele spent years doing. Surviving. The problem is that football never updates first impressions. Once enough people decided Dembele was the talented but injury-prone winger, that became his identity. Even when he helped Barcelona win trophies, even when he played well, even when he looked dangerous. The conversation never changed. Football thought it had Ousmane Dembele figured out. The funny thing is, while everyone was still talking about the Barcelona version, someone else had already started building a completely different player. PSG didn't buy Ousmane Dembele to reinvent him. At least, I don't think that was the plan. If you remember that transfer back in 2023, it wasn't treated like football had just changed forever. Barcelona were happy happy to let him go. PSG were happy to bring in another elite French international, and most people expected the exact same player in a different shirt. Except that's not what happened. Here's something I want you to picture. Think back to Barcelona Dembele. Where did he usually get the ball? Out on the touchline. His job was simple: stretch the pitch, isolate the fullback, beat your man, and create something. If he finished the game with an assist, everyone went home happy. Now compare that to PSG. The first thing you'll notice isn't actually his goals. It's where he starts appearing. He's still capable of hugging the touchline, but he doesn't stay there nearly as often. He's drifting into the half spaces. He's arriving between defenders. Sometimes he's the one making the final run instead of the final pass. That sounds like a tiny tactical adjustment. It really isn't, because football is all about where the danger comes from. Against the old Dembele, defenders had a plan. Double up, show him outside, stop the cross, make someone else beat you. Against this version, good luck. Follow him inside and you leave the wing open. Stay wide and he attacks the space behind your midfield. Ask a center back to step out and someone else suddenly has room to run. He hasn't become impossible to defend. He's become difficult to predict, and that's a much bigger problem. The best part is that the numbers don't just support this idea, they practically scream it. During the 2024 and 2025 season, Dembele scored 33 goals and added another 15 assists in 49 matches. Think about that for a second. For years, people questioned whether he could ever produce consistently. Now he's averaging almost 1 goal contribution every single game. That's not a hot streak, that's an identity change. And these weren't empty numbers either. PSG won Ligue 1, they completed the domestic treble, then they won the Champions League. In the final against Inter, Dembele didn't score. He didn't need to. He created 2 goals in a 5-0 win, showing that even on nights when he isn't finishing chances himself, he can still decide the biggest match in club football. That's what elite attackers do. They don't need one specific way to hurt you, they just find another. Which brings us back to the World Cup. I think this is where most people accidentally get the story backwards. The hat trick against Norway wasn't the beginning, it was the evidence. Everyone treated those 3 goals like Dembele had suddenly discovered something, but nothing about those finishes looked unfamiliar if you'd watched him in Paris. The movement was the same, the confidence was the same, the timing of the runs was the same. Even the composure in front of goal felt familiar. Norway didn't create this player. They were just the first World Cup team forced to deal with him. And that brings us back to the title of this video. Why does the World Cup have an Ousmane Dembele problem? Because tournaments move too quickly. You don't get months to adjust to a player's evolution. You don't get 10 league games to figure out new patterns. You get 90 minutes, sometimes less. If you spend those 90 minutes preparing for Barcelona's Ousmane Dembele, you're preparing for a player who doesn't really exist anymore. The version wearing a France shirt today is different. He's still ridiculously quick. He's still fearless in one-on-one situations. He still has the 2-footed ability that made him famous as a teenager. But now there's something else. Efficiency. That's the word that was missing from his career for years. He doesn't need 5 moments to produce 1 goal anymore. Sometimes he only needs 1. And that's terrifying in tournament football because knockout matches are usually decided by 1 moment, 1 run, 1 finish, 1 mistake. Football has a funny habit of trapping players inside old reputations. We keep describing them as if they're frozen in time. Dembele was the injury-prone winger, the inconsistent superstar, the player with endless potential. Maybe all of that was true once. I just don't think it's true anymore. And that's why I keep coming back to that Norway game. Not because it changed Ousmane Dembele, because it changed the conversation around him. For the first time in years, the football world stopped talking about what he could become and started talking about what he already is. The scary part? He's still in the middle of this World Cup, and if the rest of the tournament is still preparing for the player Barcelona let go, they might not realize their mistake until the player PSG rebuilt has already sent them home.